I'm going to go ahead and start and kicking it off. My name is Monaco Osorio, and I'm just grateful for all of you guys attending this and grateful to see a lot of beautiful faces that want to be involved. So it's great to see you guys all.
Like a DJ.
I'm going to go ahead and
His
pass it on
voice.
to a gentleman named Reed. He's going to introduce himself, and then I'll go ahead and reintroduce myself. Go ahead, Reed.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see everybody here who's on. We've got a lot of members flowing in. I'll be talking a little quiet today. I got a sore throat and feeling a little sick today. But yeah, my name is Reed. I'm part of the Youth Advisory Board, one of the founding members. Started up last October in November. Got this path of lived experience that I've gone through in my life, and this opportunity has presented itself so I can share my passions in juvenile justice and really push forward the agenda of reciprocity, things that I wish I had during my incarceration, which should be a staple now. I'm just here to kind of help and bridge that process and really represent the entirety of the Youth Advisory Board group with Marco. And like I said, sorry, I'm a little quiet today, so because I'm sick. But it's nice to see you all. Looking forward to going through this next hour with you guys.
Thank you, Reed. Thank you, Reed. So, like I said earlier, my name is Monaco Osorio. I'm part of the Youth Advisory Board. I also do some community work with Brown Issues and a few other things. I don't only do this work just because I want to see a better future for our youth, but I also do this because when my son grows up, he's only 4 right now, I want him to have an improved system and lifestyle in this community. So I'm gonna go ahead and start off with a few announcements. Just like again, I want to thank all of you guys for joining. Love to see all the beautiful faces and then everybody here. Um, so just to let you guys know, I am a guest speaker. It was great. I appreciate being here. And we are gonna have this webinar recorded, just to give you guys an FYI. So if you want to have your camera on, great. If you don't, I really push you not to be shy and show your face. Please make sure you keep your mics muted at the best ability that you can.
From
I'm
us? I
gonna
think
make
so.
sure we have this recorded, that no one's accidentally talking or ends up getting a phone call and starts speaking over other individuals. One thing I do want to let everybody know is if you can go ahead and just put your first and last name and on here. If you don't have it, you can go ahead and send it to anybody in the chat, and then we can go ahead and fix that as well. But if you haven't already done that, please, I hope you guys can update that. And if but other than that, we welcome everybody to share their thoughts, any questions throughout the whole presentation. Every question will not be forgotten. We have a beautiful team and strong individuals that are going to make sure these questions are just put to the side. So when it comes down time to to ask these questions or even have these answered, we will do that to the best ability that we can. Throughout the presentation today, like I said, the questions will be addressed at designated times. And today, the session has been certified for 1 hour of STC credit. To receive the credit for attending, you must stay during the duration of the webinar. MCLE credits are not available for this webinar. Want to make sure that's very clear again. MCLE credits are not available for this webinar. Sign up for the OYCR email list to be sure you do not miss any future webinars. Please visit our website and sign up for the email list by entering your contact info and the newsletter section on the homepage. And I'm pretty sure they'll drop that in the chat. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and pass it back to Reed. He's gonna go ahead and go over a few things. But yeah.
Hello, everybody. For those of you still just popping in, just wanted to reiterate, I'm sick, so I'm talking a little funny today. But time we go into the speaker topic introduction. And like Marco mentioned earlier, we're both guest speakers. Appreciate OYCR for reaching out to the Youth Advisory Board and having this platform for us to be guest speakers on this. So purpose of today's Youth Justice Action webinar is part of a series, and we're going to be providing, like stakeholders, CBOs, anybody involved in juvenile justice world information on practices that trends and highlights the shifting landscape of juvenile justice and to improve the outcomes for children, their families, and even just youth in the community. Today's specific webinar in the series, you'll learn more about the stepping home model. And if you don't know about it, it's a framework designed to support justice involved youth as they transition from SYTF into the LRP. You'll gain a little bit insights into its components, best practices, and its strategies for successful reentry. And just real quick before we dive in, we're going to do a little poll about the stepping home model. So you should see a poll pop up here on your screen. And just please take a moment, 1 to 2 minutes, or 30 seconds to select responses that best reflect your level of familiarity with the stepping home model. And just getting these results. And now it looks like we've got 64% of people in this webinar today are not yet familiar. This is their first introduction, and we got about 30% somewhat familiar. You've heard it, you have a general understanding, and 6% are very familiar. So you 6%ers, you guys are overachievers for today. Thank you guys for appreciate you guys participating. You guys' responses are going to help us and the speakers understand where everyone is at. That way, if you know nothing about it, obviously we're going to share more. And I'd say I'm going to introduce our speakers for today. So today on our list of our speakers, we've got Lisa Tadlock. We've got Chief Health Policy Officer with OYCR and a guest speaker. Oh, no, that's Dr. Laura Abrams. We got she's Professor of Social Welfare at UCLA. Laura Abrams is, like I said, UCLA. She works at Luskin School of Public Affairs. Her research is focused on improving the well-being of youth and adults impacted by the system and reentry into the community. Her work has shaped policies, including California law, set a minimum age of 12 years old for juvenile jurisdiction. His approach is gaining national attention. It's a very important primal age. Dr. Abrams is currently involved in several studies on the youth and adult criminal legal systems and reentry. She's also the lead investigator of a national team examining state policies and outcomes related to juvenile life without parole. She has been a key partner in development of the Stepping Home model. She's very, we're honored to have her with us today. And please welcome and joining Dr. Abrams, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Reed and Marco. And it's such a pleasure to have your partnership in this work. So I'm gonna share my screen in a minute. I just wanted to thank you so much to OYCR and Youth Advisory Board for inviting me to present today. Again, my name's Laura Abrams. Please call me Laura, and I'm a professor of social welfare at UCLA in the Luskin School of Public Affairs. I use she, her pronouns. And I just want to give a nod to my partners in the work. My colleague, Dr. Liz Barnert, was unable to be here today. She's an associate professor of pediatrics and the co-principal investigator for the OYCR work that we're doing. Reese Howard is our new project manager, and Cassandra Angel, who now works for LA County, was our project manager and helped to create a lot of the work that we're going to present today. We've also enjoyed a wonderful partnership with OYCR, Director Lucero, and JC and everybody here, and now working more closely with the Youth Advisory Board. And so the work of reform and transformation, it doesn't begin, it begins with the community. And our role as researchers is to try to compile evidence to help drive reform. So with that, and again, you're welcome to record some questions in the chat. I'm going to speak for a little while. I'll try to pause and make this interesting. So here we go. Let me grab my screen and we will go from here. So again, this is a model that was created by OYCR. They engaged our services a couple years ago, and we're really excited to be doing some research that will help improve the lives of children and families in California. Okay, so stepping home. Today, we're going to talk about stepping home. I'll give you some background on the model and the law that drove it, why it's important, and we'll also go over the elements and standards and the briefs that we've currently developed so far. Okay. Okay, so many of us here gather work in various aspects of youth, families, probation, law enforcement. All of us here create the patchwork of supporting youth in the as they move through the juvenile legal system. And we all know by now in 2025 that keeping youth involved who are involved in the juvenile legal system closer to homes and the communities creates better outcomes for youth and families and helps to keep communities safer. SB 823, the model that was formed in 2023, closed the Division of Juvenile Justice Facilities and allowed youth to be under the care of their home counties in secure youth treatment facilities and less restrictive program models. This follows a national trend to close large state facilities that were plagued by abuse and violence and poor outcomes, including up to 80% recidivism rates. And it also responds to the science about youth development and brain development that's been emerging in the last 20 to 25 years. We know that this transition is quite a process and it creates new models for counties to follow. And so what we're doing with OYCR is to create a stepping home model to help guide this transformation of California's youth incarceration and youth justice system, what I will call the juvenile legal system in this presentation, or JLS. Many of you already know this type of research, but I'm going to just kind of give a brief overview that we have decades of research now showing that for the most part, youth incarceration does not often meet the goals of keeping youth safer, keeping communities safer, or helping youth on the pathway to success in the transition to adulthood. And the reasons why this is occurring might seem basic, because many of us who've been or lived or worked in the system can sense the reasons. But the research shows that incarceration, including harsh conditions and the types of environments, are very traumatic for youth. They're not aligned with adolescent science or brain science or developmental or neural pathway science. And also that when you remove a young person from their community to a setting of carceral care, oftentimes the care falls through the equation. And without continuity in the community, maybe any lessons learned while incarceration do not stick. So we also know that we're going to talk a bit about trauma-informed care in this presentation. We have a little diagram over here showing that adverse childhood experiences have a range of effects on youth, and that we know that most youth in the system have exposure to many trauma sources and ACEs, and that when you then place a young person who has trauma in a traumatic space, for the most part, you're going to worsen the situation for young people and the communities to where they will ultimately return. Okay, I'm going to speak in a little bit of generality, but generally speaking, research has found that accountability for victim impact is not addressed by incarceration itself. So accountability in this context means that a young person has to recognize what they've done, if they've produced harm to others, people, property, or society, and that they want to take meaningful action to make amends to victims and communities. We do see this happen often as people mature, but the question is, does youth incarceration help the process of accountability? And oftentimes the answer is no, because that's not necessarily the goal of incarceration, which is punishment and removal from the community. Also, we know that incarceration can stifle young people's educational attainment, health, and employment opportunities. Studies that have used really rigorous experimental methods from court records, such as Pathways to Desistance study, the study that was conducted in Orange County, I think it was called the Crossroads study, and others, show that when you remove a young person from their home and community, incarceration can reduce high school graduation rates by about 25 to 40%, all other things considered equal. Other studies have found that correctional confinement is correlated with negative impacts on health, eventual earnings, employment, and even mortality. in the long run. So these are all goals that, as people who care for youth, we want to prevent these negative outcomes when a young person is charged with a serious crime or a serious offense. Okay, so what is stepping home? The stepping home model is a model that we've been working on for over 2 years, and working closely with OYCR, we are trying to create pathways for healing and accountability on the part of the young person, providing a circle of robust care to strengthen youth families and communities, and prioritizing service delivery at home and in the community. Again, being close to home can lead to better outcomes for youth, so the model prioritizes service delivery in the community and post-adjudication whenever possible, rather than out-of-home placement. Okay. Some of the goals that we're prioritizing include healthy development and healing. And again, most youth in the juvenile legal system do not go to detention or a correctional facility. And that's a very positive trend nationwide, along with in California. But for youth who are adjudicated with more serious charges, stepping home is going to help to transform what we do in California to produce better outcomes. So the overarching goals are healthy development and healing, accountability, and decreasing disparities that arise from race, culture, language, disability, sexuality, and other axes of disparities and differences that we find in the system. I want to emphasize that all of these goals are intended to be shared by stakeholders across the system, including people that are working in the probation system, along with mental health, child welfare, education. So it will take a village, but I think we can do it. Okay, so what does continuum of care mean? So for youth who are adjudicated with a more serious offense and who are sentenced to out-of-home care, what we've proposed is that if the court finds that a young person needs to go to a secure youth treatment facility, that would be for a short amount of time as possible, providing robust services and ending at home. The usage of less restrictive programs can increase community engagement and even college or higher education engagement, which we'll get to, and that we want to promote transitions that are consistent with accountability and community safety. Okay, so this is like a lot of bullets on this slide. So I'll go over them briefly. We're calling this best practices. So best practices versus evidence-based versus standards of care. So there's a lot of different titles and jargon associated with juvenile legal system reform. Best practices we consider encompassing knowledge that is gained from research, from principles, from values, and from the community and from youth. And we'll get into that a little bit more in the presentation. The best practices that we're currently drawing on include research-informed care. So a lot of research, a lot of looking in the literature, the principles and values of positive adolescent development. We're prioritizing the needs of youth and not just seeing young people for the offenses with which they were charged or adjudicated. Trauma-informed and therapeutic care at all levels. Resources that are put toward healthy institutional and community settings when needed. Equity to eliminate the disparities that we talked about and disproportionality. Community safety, and meaningful ways to make amends. The elements of the model that we've developed so far, and these are in the form of research briefs that we'll get into in the next part of the presentation, include safe and secure facilities, or SYTFs, LRPs, trauma-informed care, screening and assessment, positive youth development, restorative justice, credible messengers, least restrictive programs, and robust reentry services. Okay, so we've said a lot so far. So just to reiterate, the first part of the presentation, we kind of went through why stepping home and what are the key elements of the model and the goals. Okay. Let me take a sip of water. So in the next, let's see, 23 minutes, I'm going to get to go through the briefs that we've developed that are all to not just create buzzwords around the transformation of the JLS system in California, but to put some findings and, I guess, oomph behind what we're proposing. So this is the meat now. So the stepping home briefs can be found on the OYCR website. And the process is that when we first engaged with stepping home, we did a lot of work with OYCR and the Youth Justice Committee, the Child Welfare Council, to think about what are all the branches, right? We know we want to have this home-centered model, but what does that mean? So there's a lot of tentacles here. So we create a list of topics in partnership with OYCR, and we prioritize what we thought were the most important to start with. We included the stakeholders in all the briefs and comments from advocates, youth, and probation. And for the 6% of you who are highly familiar with stepping home, then you've probably read them. I was one of those 6% though, I think. Okay. The briefs are also science-based and geared to foster long-term well-being and success. Okay, so these briefs, it's important to let you all know how we develop them so that can help answer some questions. Currently, we have published briefs for OY in partnership beyond positive youth development, trauma-informed care, behavioral health, restorative justice, credible messengers, LRPs, and reentry. We also have developed briefs on gender, sexuality, and disabilities, which are still under review and comment. I think drafts might be posted of those. I'm not sure. We are developing spirituality and healing brief in combination with the National Compadres Network, who are taking the lead on that. And we're also working with a team on specifically on girls, and that is in addition to gender and sexuality. So the research question for each topic, we approached the question, what are the best practices and recommendations for care regarding youth with serious or violent offenses in the literature? So for the most part, there's a vast literature on all of these topics. First pass, we tried to take out all of the literature that is that was geared toward first-time status offenses, lower-level offenses, since a lot of that does not address what we're talking about here, which is youth with more serious charges. The briefs emphasized meta-analyses and systematic reviews. What that means is that because there's so much literature and research out there, we tended to try to find articles that had already summarized the literature as a way to start our engagement with these topics. I'm happy to say more about that if there are questions about our methodology. The methodologies are also summarized. Our keywords, what we searched for, are in the briefs as well, in the front page of each brief. Okay, we also want to note that we are encouraged by OYCR to include community-defined evidence. what that means is that practices that yield positive results as determined by community consensus, some of which might have been measured empirically by researchers or program evaluations, but may not have reached a level of rigorous research or experimental research, but have reached a level of acceptance by the community. So examples of this might include credible messenger mentoring, traditional healing practices, circles of care, and such. So we were encouraged and pleased to include both published literature, program evaluations, and community-defined evidence in our research strategy. Okay, so the next 6 or so slides will be going through a summary of the briefs, and then we will have ample time for question and answer after I go into each brief. So the first brief, Positive Youth Development, this brief is related to a larger body of literature on PYD, Positive Youth Development. Historically, practice models within juvenile legal settings work by identifying problems with youth. And so then solutions focus on fixing the young person, and success is defined as the absence of a risk for these problems. Positive youth development challenges this and instead recognizes that adolescents need positive settings in order to optimally develop. So positive youth development recognizes and prioritizes assets, not just deficits, with 6 domains: work, education, relationships, community, health, and creativity. So some benefits of the model is it emphasizes youth strengths and youth's natural ability to heal and grow over time and mature into positive functioning and successful adults. However, some question whether a correctional setting like an SYTF can really use positive youth development because it kind of clashes with a more punitive model. So we wanted to summarize the research on positive youth development to show what might be imported into stepping home, working with youth as assets, working with the community and family as assets and not deficits, we find to be important to the model. I've talked a bit about trauma-informed care. As mentioned previously, research has found that up to 90% of youth in the juvenile legal system report prior traumas, and that incarceration itself can be a traumatic event that impacts the health of youth. So this brief really gets into how to incorporate trauma-informed approach at all levels and help promote more optimal care. So some of these aspects include intentional policies, such as leadership of youth facilities, how staff are trained, how programs and practices are evaluated from a trauma-informed perspective. Really thinking about the physical environment and design of a facility, such as an SYTF or an LRP. What's in the environment that might promote further trauma, whether that's institutional settings or colors, or even the way that the physical environment is designed to restrict youth movement rather than provide freedom or freedom of movement. Trauma-informed care includes screening and assessment to identify individual needs as well as individual areas for growth, emphasizes trust and rapport, and the use of short-term and evidence-based interventions like cognitive behavioral therapies and others that are known to help work on trauma in very focused ways. Trauma-informed care requires openness and receptivity to community approaches and cultural healing that we may not even be aware of when we're operating from a traditional model. One of the kind of larger bodies of literature that we dived into is, and it's related to the trauma-informed care, is behavioral health. So a lot of us have work in behavioral health settings. In fact, corrections can be considered a behavioral health setting in some ways, providing mental health care and care for substance abuse and substance use and abuse disorders. Now, a lot of the language of behavioral health can be pathologizing from medicine, and we were aware that often the line of treatment in behavioral health is very individual, but also we know that many young people enter the system who've never had a quality behavioral health evaluation or treatment plan. This brief is long. Maybe it might not be a brief, it might be something a little bit longer. But we do provide minimum standards of care for facilities that are based on standards in the National Commission on Correctional Health Care. The National Commission on, or NCCHC, developed a set of minimum standards in youth facilities based on research. These standards of care address screening and assessment, clinical treatment, continuity, medication management, evidence-based tools, cultural and gender-sensitive aspects, and family engagement, among others. We also summarize guidelines that may be useful, such as from the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American National Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. OYCR additionally recommends approaches related to racial disparities and racist structures, trauma-informed design, holistic supports, and integration with medical services. So that's a lot to say on this brief. We recommend, however, going beyond minimum standards of care to offer optimal care that really conforms to the individual needs that youth might present when they're admitted to an SYTF. Okay, so the next brief is about this issue of accountability. So what we did was look at and scan the research literature on restorative justice. For those of you not as familiar with restorative justice, it is a strategy to repair harms by taking steps to rectify wrongdoing. This is grounded in involvement from the community and centers community members in the process of making amends. Restorative justice interventions can look like VOM, victim offender mediation, peacemaking circles, victim impact panels, community service, restitution, all kinds of ways. Many of you might even work in counties that have restorative justice. However, restorative justice has largely been applied to youth who are in lower level, who've been educated in lower level charges or who are in a diversion program. This evidence is promising, especially with youth who are old enough to understand or mature enough to understand what restorative justice is. Also, those involving violent offenses can be really powerful. Some of you might have even seen, there's been CNN specials and other wonderful documentaries about restorative justice, even with the most severe crimes between victims and those who've been accused and charged with crimes. So research is still emerging on the use of restorative justice in the juvenile legal system, but the evidence is promising. And this is also used in many community settings, as well as other countries are adopting RJ models. But we do have to watch out with some limitations in terms of coercion if folks in institutional care might feel coerced. So we find restorative justice to be an important part of the model, and that California, we may need to kind of develop our own standards around how to use it. Okay, this next brief is about credible messengers. Credible messenger is one of the interventions that has a lot of popularity in California, as well as a lot of community-based evidence. This has to do with mentors who come from the same communities and may share similar life experiences as individual youth who are in the juvenile legal system. Credible messenger mentoring has grown in popularity. Many organizations nationwide are implementing this type of program. Notable examples might include Anti-Recidivism Coalition and Advanced Peace. Research, however, is limited on the outcomes, but qualitative research has shown really positive benefits for both the mentor and the mentee in the credible messenger model. We note in our brief that there's limited outcome research, and we're hoping to change that course in California. And a challenge might be acceptance of credible messengers. Sometimes credible messengers who have criminal histories have barriers getting into facilities to mentor youth, another area that we'd like to change. And we also know that there's some limited uh, um, models to necessarily follow with credible messengers. So we're hoping that to expand this intervention in California. And of note, that credible messengers appear to be very valuable for youth and potentially able to be reimbursed as care managers and through Medi-Cal. Okay. Two more, I believe. So we have least restrictive programs. The legislation creating secure youth treatment facilities allows the youth of LRPs to facilitate the safe and successful reintegration of youth into the community. But the definition of LRPs is pretty broad. So what we did was try to hone in on the best research around least restrictive programs to provide some definition. So what we suggest, this brief is a little bit different. While others are rooted in the academic literature and science, this is more of a think piece in that we recognize the challenges that might come with implementing and sustaining LRPs. This is developing new LRPs has costs associated with it, and counties need to make a concerted effort to develop, implement, monitor, and refine LRPs. The definition of the LRPs, again, is broad. So what we propose is that LRPs should be developed that adhere to stepping home elements, foster safety, security, and dignity and respect, providing robust supports, and also that we can prioritize home, college, and community settings as LRPs. Some less restrictive programs that we know about that this could be a starting point include Pine Grove Fire Camp, California Conservation Corps, programs operated by community-based organizations, and college housing like Project Rebound. Okay, I'm right on time, and this is the last brief. So the last one obviously is reentry. This is where we want to prioritize how to transition youth off of probation or parole into the community. And this is my strong area of study that I've devoted my career to, is about successful reentry. Components of successful reentry are vast, but they're the glue, right? So everything we do when a child might be removed from the home needs to be reinforced for that transition period, which is a very critical period. In addition to young people facing challenges of reentry, that might include educational attainment, employment, caring for their own children, or reintegrating back into their families. Most young people express the need for support for reentry in research studies, including the continuity of care, of individual mentoring or counseling, continuing mental or behavioral health interventions if those were indicated, getting back into school, finding a long-term pathway toward a job, and also just linkages to a continuity of care. So some of the models that we see as promising include when a reentry program works with young people while they're in the facility and continues out in the community. So having that person, that advocate for you, is very important, and also coordinating reentry planning with probation services is another area that we want to emphasize. So all the way from entry into a facility to an LRP to reentry, the principles of trauma-informed care and positive youth development should run throughout. Okay. So last, concluding thoughts. So we've said a lot in this very brief presentation, and all of these briefs could be their own 45-minute presentation. I just want to emphasize that really the goal of stepping home is not, it's science-based, but it's also common sense. In that we want to promote healing for young people who are in the system while still investing in youth and community accountability and safety. So in essence, we want this to be a model endorsed and embraced by all elements of the system, from legal actors, probation, police, advocates, youth, families, and communities. Regardless of where a young person is situated in this continuum, it's crucial to provide people with those supports that we know strengthen youth, families, and communities, and that ongoing partnerships and dialogue will be important to effectively implement the stepping home model. Our job as researchers was to compile all this evidence and to help guide OYCR through a series of these briefs that can help ground us in a better way forward and a better way for youth that we think will work. But ultimately, the implementation and evaluation is where the proof will be in the pudding, so to speak. And I look forward to seeing where this work will go. So with 1 minute to spare, I will turn this over to Lisa Tadlock, who's going to help us wrap up and get through some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abrams. That was a great presentation. I'm Lisa Tadlock with OYCR, and hopefully for the 2/3 of you that were on the poll beginning of this webinar that were not familiar with the Stepping Home model, we're hoping that you are now a little bit more familiar with it. And our goal is that you will take what you've learned today and discuss it at the local level in terms of, how you may want to implement this in your community or in your county. When we're looking at next steps, we're looking at continually working with UCLA, and they will be reaching out to some of our LRPs to develop some best practices and an implementation plan that we will be working on to share with folks down the road. So we're not just stopping at introducing the Stepping Home model, but we are developing and helping develop implementation plans for counties to utilize. So more to come on that. What we want to do is open this up for questions from the participants. And I know that we've had a couple of private questions go to Tara. So I wanted to open it up to Tara if you wanted to share those questions. And we have a whole team on here that hopefully we can answer some of your questions. And if we can't get to them today, we will certainly get back to you. So thanks, Tara.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a lot of great questions that have been posted in the chat. Some of your questions have been addressed, but what we'll do is I have several compiled. We did not miss any, and we'll address as many as we can live. And then there may be some that we'll follow up with you in email, but we also are planning to put together an FAQ. And so you all have given us a lot of content to get started with that. So I'll just start with a couple here, and I'll open it back up to Dr. Abrams or to Lisa to answer, and then there may be some that we need to follow up on. So one question from a participant is, are there specific evidence-based practice recommendations? And this particular participant notes the population being so small in some counties, and that evidence-based practice really needs to be something that can be applied on a one-on-one basis rather than a group. And so there are questions about the evidence-based practice nature of the recommendations. I think that's probably a question for Laura, but I'll open it up to either one of you.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any specific group that they're speaking about, or was it just general? Okay, so generally speaking, most of the briefs include a compendium of evidence-based practices. So, for example, the behavioral health includes noted practices, trauma-informed care, like I mentioned, the CBT or other. Having trouble thinking of all the acronyms off the top of my head. So in this way of like compiling research, which is not a typical just let's compile the research and publish our findings, what we did want to do is say, let's compile the research and also see what can be translated to good practice, right? And what can be translated to good practice for California. We know the population here is, more Latinx, Latino, Latina than other populations. We know certain things about California in terms of disparities. So all of the evidence we bring to bear, we also look at with a critical eye. So yes, there might be good evidence-based practices for, say, trauma, right? But we also wanted to look and see, well, have those been tested rigorously in the research literature with youth of color? Have they been tested rigorously with youth who are LGBTQ plus? So, in all of the briefs contain both the evidence as well as limitations that we find of the evidence. And that includes evidence-based practices that are known, that are kind of listed as evidence-based in the research literature.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Abrams. And also, feel free to follow up with other questions in chat. You can send them direct or to the main chat, whatever your preference is. Another question, and again, there's so many really good ones here, so we're going to get to as many as we can. Another good question is, a participant wonders, how might CBOs best support or provide services to places where they're not necessarily implementing, maybe they're just emerging in their implementation of the stepping home model. So broad question, but wondered if either of you has insights around that.
I think I would punt that to OYCR or a community provider on this webinar. Yeah.
And any of my OYCR team help on that question, or is that one we may have to get back to you on that?
Be a good one. Nice,
can you
robust
repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was, how could CBOs potentially provide services to places that are not yet implementing the model, or maybe just emerging in their implementation?
Well, first of all, this does require a team effort. So if you're interested, I know that our government stakeholders, probation, defenders, DAs, judges really want solid resources and partnerships from community. So I would try to avail myself of any of the local planning that's going on with the juvenile justice commissions. I would make sure that when there are opportunities to engage probation and other partners, that you meet them, that if you have an idea or a plan that is presented, We also at OYCR provide technical assistance directly to community-based organizations and counties on these topics specifically. So you can reach out to oycr.ca.gov. We have a contact email there, and you can ask this question, and we can actually get back to you and provide technical assistance specifically. We're also trying to specifically build community capacity, and that's why Lisa is here with us from the Health Policy Division, because there are ways to help develop your staffing with permanent reimbursable dollars rather than having to depend on grants and that kind of thing. So I hope that began to answer your questions. Very good question. And we really want to see those partnerships in the community.
And to that point, actually, Director Lucero, thank you for the thoughtful response. There's a really good question just asking about the distinction between what it means that the model was adopted and sort of what the requirements are at this point of counties. Is it a mandate? What's expected from the jurisdictions, and how that differs from what it means to be adopted by the CWC?
So we were developed specifically OYCR to lead policy and to look at best practices and to share those best practices. And that's what we've done with the Stepping Home model. That it was adopted for implementation and kind of the standard for California means that the child serving agencies of the Child Welfare Council believe that we've achieved that with this model. And it was a very thoughtful process. We went through our Youth Justice Committee, which we have a variety of stakeholders, including probation and judges and representation from the district attorney and from the defenders. So it was a well-vetted process. And so it is not a mandate, but it is being held up as involving best practice and well-researched approach to stepping kids home, which is one of the only states in the nation at this time that are actively we have legislation that allows for this. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much. I'm going to try to get to a couple more. You all have some great questions. Again, many of these we'll follow up with. Couple questions about research and the model. One is, has there been any research completed on how to best address concerns around, this is a Dr. Abrams question. This particular participant notes that some of the youth that they've worked with who are stepping down have concerns about safety when coming back to their communities. And so they're wondering if there's any research on how to best address concerns about safety in the process of stepping down.
That's a great question. We may have some of that literature in the reentry brief, but if not, I think that that's something that we ought to look into in the future. I know from my research and really following young people as they reenter for years and years, that there is a lot of moving, that young people do to avoid neighborhood concerns or to avoid safety concerns. Young people tend to move around, or they stay with different friends, or they go to school here or there. But the actual research on that kind of mobility and safety is not very robust. But it's something that, we should absolutely look into for the future, because I do agree that those concerns are very real for young people transitioning out.
Great question. Thanks, Dr. Abrams. Try to get to one more. Lisa, what's the best way for people to stay plugged in if they want to ensure that they can hear about more information about implementation plans? What's the best way for people to stay informed?
Thanks. I was just typing that in the chat, but I can share that the best way to stay informed is because the implementation plan is just now starting to be developed. So we have a monthly newsletter that we provide updates. So I suggest that when you go to and visit our website, that you sign up for our monthly newsletter. In addition, beginning in a couple of weeks, the Health Policy Division will be sending out a bi-weekly email blast that you can also sign up. And this is where we provide updates on our projects as well as our partners' projects so that you can stay informed. And my hope, and I'm sure this is part of the plan, is that once the implementation plan is developed, that we will host another webinar to share those findings.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I just want to assure you all, we have many more questions, probably 3 times the amount that we just got through, that we will get back to you. We have not missed a single one. And in fact, we will use our chat log to be sure that we don't miss even any of the follow-ups. There's a couple threads going with folks from OYCR jumping in to answer questions. Thank you for that. And we will be sure to follow up with you with responses to each and every one of these questions. Thank you all so much. I'm going to hand it back over to our YAB members to close us out for today.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for that. What's it called? I just want to thank you guys again for being part of this very, very powerful and impactful presentation. It means a lot when we get a crowd like you guys because it shows who's immediately being committed to some of this work and who really wants to understand this work. So grateful for all you guys. You guys can pat yourself on the shoulder. Usually I'll give you guys all a fist bump, but we're not here physically, so it's all good. But I just want to go ahead and just kind of see if Reed wants to help me out on this one, or if he's still feeling a little under the weather.
Yeah, no, I can. Just a few closing announcements here. Just want to remind you guys that this webinar is being recorded. You guys are all going to have access. I believe it was even mentioned earlier in this discussion that there will be an email sent out individually. And then also, like we mentioned in the beginning of this webinar, this is a series. So please save the date for the next webinar in this series, April 15th. It'll be at the same time, noon to 1. And then use the link in the chat to register for the upcoming sessions. I think should be thrown in there here shortly. Man, like what a great hour to spend with you guys. Honestly, it's amazing to hear you guys talk about and share, just kind of like what's going on in the world today in juvenile justice, because we're not only having like an impact, and this stepping home model is not only going to be taken into consideration by California, but I definitely do think if we share this model a little bit more, we can get taken on by the nation. Back to you, Marco. Then again, I want to say thank you, everybody, and thanks for hopping on today.
No, yeah. So I just want to go ahead and just go over with you guys. It's reminding everybody that this was recorded and will be available on the OYCR website. It should be available possibly by like the end of this week. Don't quote me on that. As you know, we got a wonderful team who's going to try to make sure that does come out. But don't want to put a full-on deadline for them when they might release it earlier. Who knows? It's a great team, trust me. But we also want to welcome everybody to the survey to provide feedback on your experience in today's webinar. The link is going to be available in the chat. It probably was already dropped in. So go ahead and go to the chat, copy that link. Don't forget it. Fill it out if you can, because we want that feedback also, so we can all go ahead and digest that and see how we can go about things in the future, right? But we also, just like he said, save the date on April 15th. Don't forget that. It's been a wonderful afternoon to see all these beautiful faces in here, and thank you for taking some of the day out of your job. If you guys did, it's been great. But I'm gonna go ahead and end it there. So